Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the 13th episode of Business Chunautiyan. If you recollect, we started this online program exactly a year ago. It was last April when we had the first show. Very accidentally, primarily, we all stepped up together as a community to help each other during the pandemic. We never thought that this was going to become a monthly series, but it never stopped. And this is the 13th episode that we are having. And every episode has been unique. We've had some great industry leaders who actually come and addressed and spoken their minds out. And we've picked up various issues that have actually affected our industry. Today, we're going to talk about manufacturing and exports, primarily focused on the exports front. Atmanirbhar Bharat, that's what the government has been always talking about. The Prime Minister has always been talking about. And we remember the last time when we also spoke to the MSME Minister, Mr. Nitin Gadkari ji. He clearly told us that, listen, it's just not about getting into the domestic market. The final focus has to be on how do you get into global markets. So let's explore with some industry leaders today who actually already done that. And let's learn from them. And for all the new people who are aspiring to grow global, let's get going on this. My co-host today was supposed to be Mr. Sachin Maheshwari. Sachin's from the Delhi committee. Unfortunately, he is not keeping well and he couldn't join this event today. But he's the person who's thought through this whole event, got the speakers together. So all credits to Sachin, and we hope he's recovering well soon. So let's get on to our speakers today. Let me introduce you to our speakers and our panelists today. Our first panelist today is Mr. Akash Agarwal. Welcome, Akash. So Akashdeep Agarwal is the Managing Director, Asia region of Greenheck Fan Corporation. It's a world leader in ventilation products. And Akash brings a 29 years experience in the Indian HVAC industry with stints at Carrier International, York International, and Greenheck. A mechanical engineer from Harcourt Butler Technological Institute, Kanpur, Akash joined Greenheck in the year 2007 and played an instrumental role in setting up of Greenheck India plant, which is the only plant outside USA. Fabulous, Akash. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Great. Our next speaker today, our next panelist is Mr. Priyank Garg. Welcome to the show, Priyank. Priyank Garg is the Managing Director at Advanced Valves. He has a master's in computer science from Stanford University and a BTech from IIT Delhi. He has been granted 7 patents over his professional career. Prior to his current assignment, he was the Director of Product Management at Yahoo as the lead product manager for the search engine that powered Yahoo. He has also been associated with Enzym Corporation and as a consultant with Deloitte Consulting in Chicago. Thank you so much, Priyank, for taking time out for being with us today.
Thanks, Ajit. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Our third panelist today is Mr. Kalyan Bhattachar. Hello, Mr. Kalyan. Thank you for joining us today. Mr. Kalyan Bhattacharya is the Vice President Export and Business Development since 2013 with Paharpur Cooling Towers and is responsible for development of export business of the largest cooling tower company in India. His major achievements was booking orders worth more than $300 million from Bangladesh power and energy sector. He has also successfully led the closing of prestigious contracts with the construction arm of the Russian nuclear power plant and also a contract with Wuhan Engineering from China. He has been earlier associated with McNally Bharat Engineering Company as Associated Vice President. He was associated with Lemmer International and has wide experience and exposure in Chinese power equipment manufacturers. He has extensive experience in interacting with state and union power ministry and state and central PCBs. Thank you so much for taking time out today for being with us today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Great. Our last panelist today is Mr. Varun Power. Hello, Mr. Varun. Thank you for joining us. Great. Mr. Varun Power is the president of Desiccant Rotors International Private Limited. DRI is a global provider of components and systems for energy recovery, indoor air quality, evaporative cooling, and green buildings. DRI is active in over 25 countries and has supplied to iconic cooling and green buildings. DRI is active in over 25 countries and has supplied to iconic airports, malls, green buildings with products proudly made in India. Varun is a mechanical engineer and MBA in finance from Boston University. He has over 15 years of global experience in application of desiccant technologies. He has lived and worked in Middle East, North America, and is currently based in India for the last 12 years. He's a firm believer in made in India and export of world-class products developed in India. He's also a board member of the Braille Group. Thank you so much, Varun, for taking time out and being with us today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here today.
Awesome. So we've got quite a few questions which have come in also from our guests. So, but before we start, while most of our members from our trade would know each of you all, but let's get to know a little more about yourself. So, I'd like to start with Akash. Akash, why don't you briefly tell us about your company, a little bit about your introduction, about your company and your export journey.
Okay. Well, as you know, I work for Greenhead Fan Corporation. So Greenhead Fan Corporation was established in 1947 and is a privately held company by Greenhead family and Dwight Davis family. So we, as I said, we started in 1947 and our export business started in 1964 when we appointed our first rep outside of United States in Egypt. So our journey for export business goes back to almost 56 years. So we have ample experience from that. And then we started off in India, the only plant outside United States in 2014. And right from day one, we made our product which was suitable for the export market. We did not have two separate range of product, one for domestic business and one for export business. We are making just one product, which is there, which we are selling in domestic as well as for export market. And so it has been 7 good years exporting it from India, and our operations starts from Middle East, Asian countries, China, Taiwan, and right up to the Latin American countries. As you know, we are into the business of fans and other ventilation products like dampers and other things. So it is a metal related companies, and so that is our customer base. To be very honest, we had our set channel in all these countries, and it was just convincing them about shifting from US and accepting an Indian make, which was not easy, but yes, we successfully managed to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Akash. Thanks a lot. Priyank, coming over to you, why don't you tell our viewers as to a little about yourself and about the organization and your export journey?
Sure. So I started my career in the US and lived there for about 11 years, worked in the Valley as well, and then came back. Advanced Valves was started by my father in 1986, and was the pioneer in valve products for the HVAC&R industry. And Advanced Valves also we do valves for not just HVAC, but also for industrial applications, whether it be refineries, fertilizers, LNG terminals, apart from all the buildings like airports, hotels, etc. So we have a wide range of applications that we built for. And we started working on the export market from the industrial side. So the effort was started in 2000 or so. And I came back and joined the business in about 2008 and worked to take the product line global, particularly focusing on the US market. In fact, I probably spent about 2 years of the last 10 physically being in the US, apart from to get the product accepted. And then while there was the huge success on the industrial side, there's also some failures on the export side, which we have learned from. So we are today among the top 3 Indian-owned Make in India brands, and we continue to make distinct, differentiated products which are globally recognized among the top in the world for the industrial side, and also doing a lot of innovation on the air conditioning product lines, which will allow us to go global again for our product line markets. In brief, I would like to say that one should not assume that everything that you're doing is successful. We succeeded very well on the industrial side all over the world. We export to all continents, but on the air conditioning side, we have not. So this is an industry where I can share some failures with.
Awesome. I'm very tempted to ask, from Silicon Valley to HVAC. What made that happen? What happened?
Yeah, things change sometimes, right? You want to do your own thing.
Awesome. Changes for the good. That's for sure. No doubt about it. Thank you so much, Priyad. Thank you. I've got Kalyan. Mr. Kalyan, tell us about Powerful Cooling and tell us your
Yeah,
export journey. You've driven it in a very big way. So tell us about that journey of your company and your export journey.
yeah. Parpur is actually a homegrown company. It was formed in India in 1950 in Calcutta by Mr. Mahendra Sarup, who is, you can call the father of a cooling tower industry in this country. And in 1963, Parpur made a tie-up with this Marley of USA, and they were the leaders at that time. And for 30 years, this collaboration went on until Parpur absorbed the whole entire technology and all the developments in 1993. The first export was way back in 1969. It was for a cooling tower for the central air conditioning plant of a luxury hotel in Singapore. That was the beginning of the journey abroad. Since then, Parpur has exported cooling towers and components to nearly 50 countries in every continent of the planet, except for Antarctica. And the total export has been more than 100 million US dollars. Now, this I'm talking of smaller cooling towers. But of late, we have ventured into natural draft cooling towers abroad. And the first success came 2 years back, just before this lockdown. It was finalized for a 300 million US dollar for 2 units of nuclear power project plants from the Russians in Bangladesh. It is India-Bangladesh joint effort because it's at the border of Bangladesh and West Bengal. So they also have to take permission and expertise from Nuclear Power Corporation of India. So this is how we started. Now we are looking at various nuclear power projects with the Russians right now, but we'll go into others as well. We are trying for a project in Uzbekistan. We are actually one of the preferred vendors of the Russians. The company name is Atomstroy Export, which is the construction arm of Rosatom. After that, maybe we'll also go into their next project in Egypt. And the third project is also lined up, and that will be in somewhere in Europe. That place is not still told to us. Now, the application in export jobs has been as diverse as giant fertilizer plants, power plants, petroleum refineries, paper mills, sugar plants, edible oil refineries, steel mills, and chemical plants, textile mills worldwide. Now, some of the most discerning contractors and consultants in the world have ordered Parpur cooling towers for their projects and certified our quality and service as equal to the best anywhere. This is how
Awesome. That's awesome because, in fact, we have a lot of companies who are also in the contracting business in our community, and I'm quite sure everyone would be really interested in knowing how you actually handle some of these contracting assignments outside the country. Over to you, Mr. Varun. Yes. Tell us about your company. Your company is very well known in the Indian market. Tell us your journey, especially in the exports, from manufacturing to exports. Tell us about your company.
Sure. So we are, as a group, two flagship companies, Brayer and DRI. And Brayer actually has its origins back in the US, going back to 1964. The company in India was started by my father in the late 70s, and the export initiative started as early as the 80s. The very first factory outside India that was set up as a wholly owned subsidiary to address the Southeast Asian market was way back in 1992. And we, as a company, have been very bold. To just give an example, we have been present locally in the Chinese market as one of the first Indian companies. And I remember it was us and Thermax going back to 1996. So we were exporting to China going back to 1996, and we continue to do that. In fact, not only export, but we manufacture in China for the local market as well. So fast forward to 2020, 2021. Our installed base today globally is in about 80 countries, and this is spread over between, like Priyank mentioned, between industrial products, but all in the air treatment realm, and also into commercial HVAC products under DRI. And on an annual basis, I think we are addressing actively about 40 to 45 countries as a strategic plan where we have presence and we're exporting regularly. So over the years, our models, our business models and way to approach the market have also matured. So there are, just to give a quick example, we are operating in different models. It could be a distributor, a representative office, a branch office, a sales subsidiary, manufacturing subsidiary. And I think one has learned a lot during the process. One has been aggressive, and I think we've not literally left any geography untouched. We've made an effort to explore and be aggressive. So we have a very solid, strong, internal, technically oriented export team, which is always on the move. Just to give an example, I myself am out of the country about 16 to 18 times a year. So it's been a lot of on-road work. And I think over the session, we'll all share our experiences, and it'll be good to listen to everyone else.
Awesome. 16 to 18 times. Has that life changed, Varun, for you in the last 1 year?
Of course. And it's a very welcome change, let me tell you. especially the wife and the kids appreciating that.
Awesome. Too good. There's always a silver lining to every cloud.
Yeah.
Awesome. Too good. So let's get into a little specifics about the whole thing. So Akash, I want to actually bring you in here. Tell us what are the opportunities that are there in exports in our HVAC&R industry? Primarily, a lot of people who are already into local manufacturing are now saying, how do I get into it? Where are the opportunities lying here, primarily for exports?
Oh, I mean, today I have seen, I have been into this with Greenhead for 15 years, and I have seen the market being transformed, both domestic as well as the export market. I mean, initially in 2007, 2008, people had a certain reservation about accepting material from China or from India and all. But over the past 6 years, 7 years, I've seen market getting changed. That acceptability is no longer a question till such time we are able to maintain those certifications which are mandatory in those part of the world. I mean, every country has their own set. We have to get civil defense approval, registration with them, and all those things. So until unless we are meeting those criteria, Make in India is by and large not a problem. I think if I have to put a percentage, I'll say 99% of the jobs we don't have a problem in getting them India make acceptable. So I mean, opportunities in the HVAC industry lies. I mean, we are executing jobs in Vietnam, we are executing jobs in Taiwan, we are negotiating a job in New Zealand, we are Middle East and Africa. I mean, I don't know, everywhere. And Latin America, we want to do more, but as Varun said, as we move ahead and we learn about each other, so we face certain challenges in terms of logistic issue for Latin America, because apart from the lead times, the sailing time itself is about 6 to 8 weeks. So which makes our product slightly uncompetitive, because nobody is going to wait for 18 to 20 weeks for getting their material. But I mean, opportunities lies everywhere. I mean, Egypt is developing, Saudi Arabia, there is a lot of opportunities. You name a market and there are opportunities. So as I said, we are currently actively supplying to Vietnam, and these, I mean, even in the infrastructure job, not only in the commercial air conditioning side, but even in the infrastructure jobs like the airports, like the metro rails and road tunnel jobs. So everywhere. So I think there is a whole set of opportunities for all the Indian companies to enter into that market and grab the business.
Awesome, Akash. And you keep saying, I mean, you're saying that the opportunities are very big. Priyank, while Akash is saying that there are huge opportunities for Indian companies, how do you think Indian companies should actually prepare for these export business, and who should they prepare to compete globally with?
Yeah, that's a good way to start the discussion, Ajit, because the first step is thinking about the product, right? We are all manufacturing companies to having manufacturing products. I guess I've always been a product kind of person. So, from my perspective, the first thing to do is to understand which market you want to go to, what kind of product do they buy. See, you have a product like we make valves for piping. We may be following certain standards, maybe an IS standard or a BS standard, and that may be different from what's followed there. If you want to go to Japan, you'll have a JIS standard, etc. So you need to really understand the product offering and what is it that the market that you're targeted or the markets that you're targeting. How would you comply with those requirements? The even before you understand the specs, you need to understand the market dynamics, right? Like a market like Korea, South Korea is all about underfloor heating. Whereas in a market like the US, all residential cooling systems are standardized around a particular mechanism or design. So these kind of understanding of the market dynamics, what is it that the market likes to buy, and then the corresponding relevant applicable standards or technical requirements that you would be offering. We are in most part offering technical products, whether it is valves, whether it is heat exchangers, whether it is the cooling towers, whether what DRI. All four of us on the panel today are doing technical products. So in technical products, we need to be in line with the relevant standards for that market. They don't care what IS wrote. I mean, they only know what they know. And the market already has a whole set of players playing in that market compliant with the standards. So you can't just come in and start selling whatever you have off your shelf. You have to offer what the customers are specifying and buying. Of course, once you've figured out what the market product fit is, not every product of yours will fit that market just because of the nature of the market. So that, of course, comes because of understanding the market. And then a very important aspect, and this is particularly true for countries like India, where 15, 20 years ago, and even to some extent now, people were hesitant to use Indian product. The international testing and certification that is applicable to that industry. Anybody that comes to the market needs to be certified or tested or approved by the relevant standards that are applied in the industry in that market. Now, in India, we may accept a lot of international standards, and so a supplier from the US, for example, let's just take the industrial example of piping. A lot of the API standards are used in all the Indian refineries. So we don't need, once you have the API certification, international players don't need to get a certification in India, but that does not work necessarily both ways, right? So similarly, if you have medical standards in India, you would comply with Indian medical standards. The same way, we need to make sure that for our target market, whatever the relevant standards and certifications are, those need to be really well understood, because otherwise we're just going to end up banging our head against basic spec requirements and never comply. And these are the kinds of things that are very hard to work around. It's just a lot of effort for very little result if you're not complying to the basic technicals, right? The basic technicals have to be ticked off. The buyer has to just be able to say, tick, 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 tick. Okay, now do I want this guy? Look at the commercials, whatever brand relation, quality concerns you have. But the technical should not be a hurdle. So the first thing in my mind is always to make sure your product is fitting the market and fitting the market specifications. Of course, one needs to understand that you're going to be exporting to a country and you're going to a place where there are already probably players in the market that have an established running business. So if you're coming in, you need to have some value proposition that's going to make people come to you. So think about that, whether it is differentiation, whether it is innovation, whether it is better value or a better price, or just what proposition you bring to the table. That, I think, is the number one thing to do before you start to go into a market.
Awesome. With the opportunities and everything, Varun, the first thing that any company now thinks is, how's the government going to support me? Because the government says, even when we spoke to the MSME minister, we never spoke about exports, but he was like, you got to actually stay focused and come up with a plan whereby exports is what is going to be important. So the first thing is all about governments. So now they've declared the PLI schemes. What are the different kinds of government support that is usually available for companies to get into the global markets from India?
So before I give an example of the schemes that are available and specifically what we are availing of, I think we internally have never really relied on the government to provide us incentives or subsidize anything that would assist us in exporting. I think at the end of the day, it's the will. You have to overcome bureaucracy if there is. And let me tell you also, we complain about bureaucracy in India and ease of doing business. We are operating in countries like Brazil, where they are 10 times more bureaucratic than us. So I think if the will is there to export, the government will assist you. There are schemes. But I think at the end of the day, our approach, my approach has been not to rely on the government schemes. We've taken benefit of several of them. And again, this is something that we take as a hard cash flow to plow back into marketing activities to further exports as opposed to substituting costs. So that's an internal approach that we've taken. There is a new PLI scheme. I'm not very familiar with that because I think that is something very recent. It's based on incremental sales growth every year. And I think I personally need to get clarity on that. But I believe it's more relevant to the electronic sector as of now. But just to quickly mention some of the export benefits that we take both at the central level and the state level. We're Haryana based. So duty drawback, of course, everyone is aware of. And depending on your HS code and the product that you're exporting, you can get benefits of that. We've had a very good scheme called MEIS, which is the Merchandise Export in India scheme. That is being phased out, but that ran for several years. The advantage there was that you obviously had licenses available where you could substitute certain costs for imports, but those were also available for sale in the open market, and you could really get a good conversion rate and hard cash being deposited, which you could use for operational. Of course, GST, you've got IGST refunds. For even CapEx imports for machinery, you have the EPCG scheme. Also, very interestingly, and we've availed of this, you have abilities to today reimburse your patent costs, especially international patent costs, and we've taken good benefit of that. Also, trademark registration internationally. Haryana government, as an example, and a lot of states have that, and that has to be investigated. We have a export freight subsidy scheme as well, which we take advantage of. You've got organizations like EEPC where you can participate along with them in international trade shows, and also you get reimbursement for your international trade show expenses. So there are a lot of state government schemes which one has to. So to just give an example, what we've done is, in fact, we've got a person full-time who's looking into these export schemes because they do change budget by budget. But there is a lot the government is doing. There is documentation and paperwork involved, but if you can do all that and satisfy the documentation, you actually see cash flow coming back from the government.
Awesome. In fact, we just had a question that just came up. One of our members, Sumit Mathani, he's asking, who am I supposed to contact to understand these schemes? Who should I, which is the department that I should look at?
So you have consultants available in the marketplace who have connections with the foreign DGFT or things like that. And so there are consultants available, and you can definitely avail of their services to get to know of these schemes. And so there is a lot of fine print that comes out with every budget, but the time has to be taken out and the effort has to be made because it's still a lot of documentation work. That goes without saying. You have to sign documents after documents for these reimbursements.
All right, great. Now, Kalyanji, I want to actually bring you in here. You've been a very big exporter from the industry. Who are the other exporters from the industry in your segment, in your field? And do you see that there is a scope for many more people to get into that business to access the global markets?
Yes, really, but we don't find many Indian companies actively exporting this, which is in our product segment. We find a very few in certain cases, like in Bangladesh, some smaller companies come and go. In Thailand, in also in Indonesia. Sometimes we face Indian competitors to us. Mostly for these are all for small, very small cooling towers. But for the larger ones, our competition is only with the large global companies who are 6 or 7 in number, and we have to fight them tooth and nail to win the contract. Now, smaller towers are generally sold really locally to HVAC contractors in India, even when they are exporting. So this is not really an export. I mean, we are selling in Indian rupee, because these people buy the cooling towers from us. They place order on us from India to India, and then they export it. Sometimes they also buy from, say, Middle East, mostly from Middle East, where we have some connections, where we have a local partner. Because in those kind of cooling towers, you really need a presence, 24/7 presence over there, because these cooling towers need hand holding, they need troubleshooting, they also need for maintenance of the cooling towers. And for that, we have good partners only in the Middle East, so who can do that. Otherwise, this is not really, I don't find a lot of presence of other Indian companies there. For large cooling towers, this problem is not there. We complete the job, supply the materials all made in India in our 5 factories all over the country. And we dispatch it to those places, and then our supervisor goes. Erection is done by the owner, actually, who is placing order on us. So under our supervision, and then testing, commissioning, everything is done by us. This is how we operate. Sometimes, very, very few times, we have seen L&T competing with us, like this nuclear power project in Bangladesh. They were there. We were fortunate enough to beat them. And the one reason being, these large Indian contractors who are also doing this construction work, especially concrete cooling towers, it is not their bread and butter. So the focus is not there in the cooling tower. Like there used to be Gammon and then L&T now. So unless and until it's very large value, they don't get interested. So we are the only Indian company who represent the nation worldwide in our segment.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, and you're saying that you're taking on the global players in a big way, right? It's an Indian brand taking on the global players.
We have to survive, and especially we have the price advantage. And in 2016 March, we took over the largest dry cooling system manufacturer, air-cooled condenser manufacturer, SPX. And that's how our presence worldwide has also increased. Now, this is dry cooling is actually used where there is scarcity of water, where you cannot use cooling tower. So it's slowly increasing. The use is increasing. In fact, we have competitors from Europe, we have competitors from China, and also we have competitors from Korea a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kalyan. Thank you very much. So, Akash, I'm going to actually get back. Now, you heard all the nice, good things in the first round as to actually what are the opportunities and everything. Now, I really want to get into a little bit of the difficulties and the challenges. And, when you're actually manufacturing in India and you're going to fight the export markets, how do you see the component manufacturing, that ecosystem? Is it there? Because most of us say that ecosystem is not there, so you end up importing it and you don't become very competitive in the global market. How true is that, and how is your company facing that whole ecosystem of component manufacturing for your products?
Yeah, so this is true, to a great extent. But as GreenHack, we are a highly vertically integrated organization. So we do everything on our own. So when it comes to component sourcing or vendor development in India, we only look towards the procurement of electric motors for our product, which we source it from outside. But apart from that, practically all the other components we make it in-house. So we are not dependent on a lot of other companies. But based on my experience, I mean, it is a challenge because see, India has, like I give you a simple example. Indian government, I think it was in 2019 January, prohibited the use of IE1 electric motors, right? So minimum which can be sold in Indian market is IE2. Now for my export market, I I cannot even procure an IE1 motor now. So when I'm competing with the in Middle East with European manufacturers or with some other manufacturers, they are or with the local Middle East manufacturers, they are using an IE1 motor. I have to compete with them using an IE2 motor, which is 10 to 12% more expensive. So that is so, but that is the nature of the beast we are in. I mean, we cannot have our cake and eat it also. So we have to be competitive. Other thing, when the particular mindset of the people world over is, oh, this is coming from India, it has to be cheaper than 20% cheaper than a European brand. But believe me, in India, except for the labor, nothing else is cheap. Electricity is expensive, land is expensive. So the entire ecosystem, except the labor part, I mean, you see the steel, what is happening in the last 3 4 months in the steel industry. I think the steel in India, I mean, it has increased everywhere in the world, but the amount of increase which has happened in India is nowhere to be compared with the other parts of the world. So yes, we have our own set of challenges, but we have to overcome those challenges as a global player. And when you are competing with everyone, I mean, whether it is the Chinese manufacturer or the European manufacturers, or in Latin America, we have to compete against the US manufacturer. So we have to compete. So we have to be proactive. We have to forecast that. And the other challenge with the Indian manufacturers is the commitment level. The commitment level, I mean, when I am exporting a business, the expectation from my customer is exactly the same what he expect out of GreenEgg US. Right. Now my component, oh sir, what happened? It is only 7 days delayed. Now, so that mindset, that chalta hai attitude of the various Indian manufacturers, if we have to take on China, if we have to compete with the world, with the best of the world, we have to come out of that attitude and start performing. So that is those are the challenges which we face in the ecosystem. Then logistic is again a very big challenge. I mean, not only in terms of the value, because our products are very voluminous in nature, so freight components plays a very important role. And like Briar or DRI, we are also based in Delhi area or Gurgaon. So the transportation to the port. So and then the other thing is that in today's digitalization, we have a registration. We have to get ourselves registered with every port. So if I am not registered in Mumbai, I cannot do my container sealing in Mumbai because I am only registered with a port in Gujarat or a port in Chennai. So sometimes the shipment get delayed because of all these things, because the vessel is available from Mumbai and not I cannot ship it from Mumbai, or vice versa. So those are some of the challenges. But yes, we have improved a lot over the past 8, 10, 12 years. And we are in process of further improvement, and I'm sure all these things will be overcome. But my point, the attitude of the various vendors, that also need to be aligned with the export oriented business there.
So I got just one question as a follow up to that. You said you manufacture these components in house. Let's say hypothetically, if that component ecosystem was healthy and was around there in India, would you go asset light and not manufacture it and source it from there, or would you continue to do what you're doing right now?
To a certain extent, maybe to start with, but our company philosophy is, even in US, we are a $900 million company, and we do, I mean, very very small portion of our business is sourced from the outside. But maybe if all those components are available at a reasonable price and at a reasonable quality, we would have taken it from there.
Okay, awesome. Great. So I'm just going to bring in Priyank right now. Priyank, the other challenges for manufacturers who are actually selling globally. I mean, what do? Do you set up your own factories, set up dealers, distributors, representative offices? How do you access this distribution in global markets? And are they standard across, or they keep changing at various markets? How does it work actually?
Yeah, it's a good question. Is how to start is the biggest difficulty, right? That's when the maximum effort is required. I mean, I think a lot of this is determined by the market. What is the buying pattern in the market, right? If the customers in that market buy through contractor, or if the contractors are doing the buying, or if agents are there for all the other players, like if you go to the Middle East, everybody has to work through an agent. There might be local regulations that may apply. As far as I'm not familiar directly with the Brazil local market as much, but like South America, I think in most markets you have to have a local partner who's present and things like that. So what is the buying pattern in the market has to be the first thing that has to drive what is your go to market strategy for entering the new market. If there is a huge volume and advantage, you can think of setting up a factory, but nobody will start with the setting up a factory. Right? You will have to first have a market to develop and have some movement and volume to justify a factory being located in a location in a specific market or nearby to that. So it is always important to have people next to the customer. Now, there are multiple approaches, and I think Varun will also have a bunch to say about this, but you could start with the representation or distribution. In our case, we do valves. Valves are much more dense in terms of the price to volume ratio, and so we don't have any significant advantage, significant logistics cost as a percentage of the product cost. So for us, it makes sense to scale up manufacturing in one location, have the economies of scale, and export from here. But there is a huge market which is present in the Middle East and in other parts of the world, which is all serviced locally. So here's an example where I can tell you about where we have failed as Advanced Valves to do exports. Right, we have went to the global market in the industrial products, where our products are competing against top of the world manufacturers from Europe and USA, with very little competition from the low-cost suppliers such as from China or even Thailand. And we were classified by customers as high value suppliers, which means you can either say call it low cost or high value, however you say it. But for them, we were an alternative which is quality comparable and at a better price. But in those markets, when we went, we used representation networks because our products were made to project orders. They were not stock and supply kind of products for the industrial markets. And there, it was very important to have the marketing presence, but not necessarily a significant distribution presence. So why the marketing presence? Because the marketing presence is required to get customers to approve your product, to look at your references, to build the relationships, get opportunities, get quotations, get an order, and then service it. And so we started with representation, and then we have added our own persons in some of the key markets like the US and the Middle East, so that we can actually continue to build this as a relationship and own the relationship much more deeply rather than depend only on representation, who of course have multiple other products to sell. So that's for those kind of products which are on engineered products, made to order kind of markets. Now on the air conditioning side, we have actually not succeeded. And the reason is that when we go to a market like we go to the Middle East, even the closest market to us on the air conditioning side, there's already a huge number of players present from all over the world. They have huge distribution networks or significant distribution networks with channel partners, stock, etc. And till recently, our only offering was just like them, just like the rest of the world. There was no differentiation. We do valves. So in valves, you differentiate by the temperature ranges you operate in, and the amount of pressure that the valves can take and things like that, and the media. But none of those are exotic in the air conditioning market. It's all ambient, it's all low pressures, unlike the industrial market. So there, we actually tried to go in, we appointed a rep, we appointed a distributor, but actually none of that worked. And the reason it didn't work is because we didn't have the physical presence and the rotation of business and enough of a value differentiation versus the competition from China or elsewhere that people felt the need to change. And the way to now enter those markets for us in the future is now and going forward is as we are working with those customers is because we have some new patented products which are differentiated from what everyone else in the world is offering. And then we create a reason for the customer to say, look, you're doing something that is of good value to me in some reason. And so now maybe I should look at you. Yeah, the other things that you do are more commodity. You're just like the rest. So if you're just doing the same, you know, if you're not 15% cheaper, why do I bother? I have to trust a new company. I have to deal with some failures. He already has stock. I don't have to think about it, pick it up and go. And that failed for us for the last 6-7 years. But with this differentiation, then we need to again to do marketing, build a rep network. But ultimately, in a HVAC type market where most products are standardized or relatively not so differentiated, and the projects move fast when they move, you need to have distribution presence locally. And if there is a service requirement of the product, then you need to have your own service network capability or a very, very good service network partner. So it is important to understand the buying pattern of the customer in the market that you're going, and what is the kind of service level or experience that the customer is used to, because you need to replicate the same or do better. You can't do any less. Like if everyone else has an office locally with a service team of their own, and you expect to remotely call people and say, oh, my rep will come over and I will have my service person come and sometime visit you when the rep service team is free. I mean, you're not going to get there. So that's the thing to think about is what is it that works for your customer expectations, where you can beat the equal or beat the competition to get into their purchase order list.
A very interesting question which has come from Sayani Haribabu, who is from Chennai. He's saying, surviving this pandemic is really tough. What strategies have you adopted, tried over this situation, especially in the exports market? How did you manage that?
Yeah, so the export markets are also tough in this situation. It is what has worked is that you have to understand the shift in the customer demand. We have a lot of project-based business, and that project business, of course, is on hold because nobody is investing, because nobody wants to make decisions. So we have shifted a lot of our export businesses towards distribution-based services and focused a lot in the last year and a half on building our distribution reach so that we can service the day-to-day market, building the inventory levels, using some of the spare capacity that we had in the plant to build that physical presence, which we didn't focus on earlier as we were more project-oriented in those markets. So, and then the other thing to do is just do something new while you have the time and you have not much else to do, so that you can be ready for the future. And so some of the work that we're doing around innovation will and new IP that we have filed, that is what is giving us interest from customers for the future that we hopefully will result in better outcomes in times to come.
Awesome. Varun, I want to bring you in out here. You've
Sure.
been in 25 countries, and how do you actually, what are the best marketing strategies for these countries? How do you actually navigate this whole maze of certification, which is there in every city, being a technical product that the industry that we are in? How do you actually navigate
Sure.
this whole thing?
So just to add on what Priyank was mentioning, and I think everybody has to do an introspect. So I think you have to first classify whether you're a component player or you're a system player, or you could be both as well. So what you will find is that as you move further away, or your intention to sell away from your manufacturing base, component sales start becoming a lot more viable, and system sales, that means you yourself are the integrator, become more viable in your closer geography. As an example, in India, maybe left and right of us, Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, South Asia become more viable system markets, whereas other international markets start becoming more attractive from a ease of sales and costing for component sales. Certification testing does play a very, very important role. It definitely right away starts establishing your credentials. It puts you at par on a technical aspect with any other local or regional player. So we have really relied a lot on that to gain market access. It's a low hanging fruit to enter markets in many ways, and these are international standards which are accessible very much in India through their presence through their offices in India as well. But also going for certification is one thing, but I think fundamentally our approach has been that we have to make the very best product in the world. We should be second to none, and that goes with a lot of in-house R&D testing, and that then starts showing up in your certification and performance results as well. So if you are the very best, and we have to take advantage of our low-cost R&D options and our engineering talent that is available in India. The things that are available at a lower cost, we must capitalize on that. And R&D and testing is something which is there. And cost of certification comparatively is much lower. So if you were, let's say, working with Intertech or SGS or XYZ, the cost to get that same certification in India is lower than if you were to apply in the US or a European office as well. We've heavily relied on certifications as ways for easier market access and entry.
So when you have these different markets and different certifications, you also end up having different SKUs or country-specific products? Is that how it is?
I think the differentiation starts coming in, especially on electrical standards and electronic standards. So same products that we're selling to the Japanese market versus the US market, the manufacturing, the metalwork, the physical aspects of it, and the mechanical aspects could be very similar. But when it comes to electrical, that's where the challenges start. And one has to be aware, and one cannot take a risk on that front, whether it's UL or CE. So that understanding and knowledge is very key. So the electrical part has to be addressed more strongly than the mechanical part.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Varun. Kalyanji, I'm going to bring you in out here. Now, the first thing is when I'm getting into experts, I need something little easy way out. So according to you, which are the easier markets to get into and which are the difficult ones to get into? What does your experience say? If I'm going to start exporting, which are the markets that I should first try, where even as an Indian company, you can get in much faster? What's your take on this?
To be frank, there is no easy market.
Awesome.
And all difficult markets are to be made easy. That's the
awesome.
way.
Lovely.
There is no other way. Because every market is difficult. It has its own problem and it has its own advantages. Like for us, Bangladesh is so near, where and they have a kind of reliability on the Indian products, and the acceptance of Indian products, especially our the company is present there for a long time now. And Parpur is the only company which manufactures each and every component, almost excepting the electricals, the motors and the instruments. Everything else, mechanical and even civil, is in-house. We can do everything. So they have seen that for years. So we kind of actually have an advantage in operating in Bangladesh. That's the only place where we get lots of advantage. And in fact, in between, there were some Chinese players who came into the picture. They were actually getting orders, giving a lower price, and we used to lose orders. Now we have also regained back all those. And especially after the new government in Bangladesh for the last 12-15 years, they have a very close tie-up with India, and we get an advantage.
Awesome. Okay. Priyank, you wanted to share something. You wanted to share something on the same thing.
Yes. So I was just wanting to add to what Varun said about using the engineering talent in India. I think that's a very valid point. That is one of the reasons that I've always seen Indian companies succeed, is because we are able to do quality and engineered products at a better price than our global competition. And that's the only way that it is possible to stand out against a high-scale manufacturer like out of China, say, for example, with much lower cost of money, much lower cost of logistics, much larger scale, economies of scale. So in competing in commodity products becomes very difficult until you have some sort of differentiation, either through your certifications and through whether it be a UL or any other certification. And getting those certifications in India is much lower cost, because even the certifying authorities' personnel charges are lower, or whatever their fees to get the certifications are lower, and we have a much better talent available at the cost we have in India. And the fun thing that I do want to say is that fundamentally one has to take the approach that everything you make is made for the global market at the same time. You can't be taking, oh, we'll make like this and then we'll try to make something special for the global market, because that does not work across a company and a system. And so what Varun said about making everything always best to the global standards, to world standards, and be nothing but the best in the world, has to be the fundamental approach that you have to take. And we can do that in India. We have the capability. We just need to have the focus and not take shortcuts, because once you do that, then that creates a long-term runway for you to work on.
A very interesting question that came across when you were talking. How much have you invested in R&D? How much is actually, why not much investment by R&D by Indian companies? Why do you think that is the case?
So I don't, I think a lot of people are not necessarily confident in what they can do in terms of R&D, right? We have in Advanced Valves invented multiple products, filed multiple patents. But before we filed the first patent, the patent seemed like, oh man, it is something that, only companies like GE do. But once you start doing it, once you believe in yourself and realize that, once you put your mind to it and you think about it, it's not beyond our capability, then it can happen. And then people do invest in R&D. It is unfortunate that I think it's the first hurdle, I think, is just belief and self-confidence. And second a hurdle, of course, is probably the kind of approach to the business or to the effort that's being made. Some companies are not working on an R&D approach. They are looking at a technology transfer type of approach. Some companies are working on commodity products. So they may not have that business need. But I think, personally, I feel, that the first hurdle is people's self-belief, and even customers, don't believe, oh, you actually invented that, right? When we won the first award for best product, it was a Breyer Award in 2013. Even the jury members, they came to our stand and said, after they had discussed, and I won't take the name, Varun, but they said, "Did you really do this for the first time in India?" So it's kind of like it's just the belief around us. That is the issue. I mean, Varun, it was really interesting. 2013, we had an ACREConf, and the jury meeting had happened, and the jury members came. Were you really the first one in the world to do this? So, I think its first problem is the belief. Like other companies in India, which have always said, once you start saying that I want to be the best in the world and I will do the best and build the infrastructure, testing, engineering, quality certification, and take that approach, it grows on itself. But first step is the belief. I think that is the biggest hurdle why people in India don't do enough R&D.
Yeah, there's a question that came. I think it's addressed to both of you all. Actually, it says, what kind of certifications and testing your companies have done? People just want to know what are the kind of different certifications that you guys have done, so they get a start from somewhere. Maybe Varun, you can take it first.
So that is very product specific, but to generalize it, I think, of course, the basic ISO standards, but we very serious about today you have ISO implementation agencies which will come and validate anything, but I think you have to go with a strong agency which keeps you in check. So various ISO standards, QC standards, that is a very generic space. So that sort of sets infrastructural systems into your thing. But I think product specific, there are, we for an example, I think put together product specific certification, we would be probably closer to 40 to 50 certifications, which we have to renew and do annually. So these are AHRI, Intertech, Eurovent, UL, CE, different agencies. So I think it boils down to, like, for valves, there's a whole different world of standards and certifications that you have to apply to. So it's very product specific, as a quick answer. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I think Yeah, the highest level which would apply to everybody, of course, is the ISO 9001, 45001. Those certifications are now becoming, I mean, 9001 has been normal for a long time. 45001 is becoming an expectation from all customers, and it's a good one to have as well. We do too. In valves, yeah, there are lots of API, ASME, other standards that apply. UL is one thing we have for fire water systems, etc. So the standards become very, very product specific and also sometimes region specific. But the basic quality systems standards are the same, ISO, CE, and those would be something that everyone would probably benefit from.
Awesome. I'm going to get Akash here. Akash, let's move from the opportunities. We've kind of understood a lot from the exports, but how's COVID affected this whole thing here, and how have you managed to pull it off during these difficult times?
Well, I mean, we are no different. We are in a world where COVID impacted everyone. But the beauty of being a global company is that not all the countries around the world were impacted at the same time. So it was some countries were still operating when most of us were under lockdown, and when they got impacted, other countries started opening up. So for us, like during the last financial year, during the first half, when the business was very low in the Indian market and Middle East market, surprisingly, Egypt and Taiwan supported us to a great extent. I mean, in fact, if I have to put on records, our export business grew by almost 50% during the last financial year, and the overall revenue grew by 20% in the last financial year. So during the first half, Taiwan market and Egypt market kept us busy, and then around September time, Indian market started opening up, and then the Middle East market also opened up, and then Latin America, as I said, is a filler. It keeps on sending us few orders every now and then, and those are pretty high profitable business for us. So as I said, the entire world was not closed at the same time. So being a global company, some of the other markets were opened. So first half was supported by Egypt and Taiwan. Second half was supported by Saudi Arabia and UAE market. So that helped us a lot. I mean, apart from the business we did in the Indian market. So yeah, but COVID has impacted every individual, every organization around the world. Our cost of operations have gone up. You have to follow the COVID protocols. So our profitability is slightly under stress. And then the metal prices globally have increased like crazy. I mean, nobody can predict over the past 4 months. But yeah, in terms of top line, our revenue grew by 50% on the export business in the last financial year.
Awesome. Priyanka, you've been an Indian company and exporting, and they say when you're, as a country, we are late into the global markets, at least in our engineering products. And most of the countries that have actually benefited is because they have got great government support. So from your perspective, what's the kind of support that is required for smaller companies, MSMEs, who would want to get into manufacturing and who want to access global markets? How do you think the government should be? One is to give the slogan of Atmanirbhar Bharat, but that's fine. But bottom line, what do you think is the actual action that is required, and what's missing?
I mean, of course, you can start many places on this. You could start with the basic process of starting a company, but I'll not go into all of those things. I'll just try to talk about a couple of things that I particularly have top of mind in terms of exports and export support. One of the things that's most important is to basically not have these duty inversion structures where your incoming components are costlier than your finished products, which makes it very hard because of inverted duty structures. That makes it very hard for you to actually have a competitiveness in the market. If the government really wants to be Atmanirbhar, they need to be strategic about what is it that should be the duty levels on inputs versus end products, and so that we are able to compete against global players where they have got this worked out, and our competition when we are going abroad does not have this handicap behind them. Another thing that I want to personally highlight is something that I have seen change personally in the last 6-7 years. Right, the banking and the foreign exchange process in India is so cumbersome, and so cumbersome compared to not the rest of the world. It's so cumbersome compared to what it was in India itself till before Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi, right? When those two gentlemen wreaked havoc on the PNB balance sheet and whatever else they did, they unfortunately, apart from what we talk about in the news media, they left a huge headache on the entire financial transaction process for all companies when they're dealing with international transactions, right? It's such a big effort compared to. It's hard to explain to customers why it takes so long to get one thing done versus another thing done. I mean, it's like it's embarrassing. Oh, sir, the bank is closed, or the bank these paperwork is required. Please provide these additional documents and things that were not normally asked anywhere in the world. This has become it's an embarrassment for us in front of global customers and global markets. It's very, I mean, maybe if it's a vendor, you can probably act like a, I need this and I need this. But if it's a customer, it's very hard to get those things with a straight face. So that's the kind of thing where it's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, Nirav Modi and Mehul Choksi did what they did. We don't want that to happen. That's not right. That's criminal. Yes, we need to stop it, but that doesn't mean you stop all day-to-day business and make it so hard that people just end up losing exports. In general, the whole process of exports, the process of the bureaucracy, wherever we reduce, the number of checks and steps, and focus on end-to-end checks, we let people do the right thing, but keep end-to-end checks or systemic issues, not make it so complicated. That is always going to be smooth operations for exports, which is because customers are used to dealing with vendors from all over the world, and very few complain like we do in India, ki ye nahi hua, wo nahi hua, this is that issue, whatever issue. So that is two things I did want to bring out in this question.
Yeah, I guess that's a problem, right? And then even in the domestic space, one guy messes it up and everyone else, he might just go scot-free, but everyone else pays the
everyone else is
all of us are facing the brunt of it.
Yeah.
So Varun, from your side, tell us from a government support, and especially I'm talking from an infrastructure perspective. You're based in Haryana, landlocked. How do you access the ports? I mean, what are the challenges that you face from a logistic perspective, and how do you think the government can actually support our industry to make sure that we can move into exports in a big way?
I think logistics-wise, a lot has been done. I must admit, and I think I've seen the change in the last 5 years, 10 years. So landlocked cities and manufacturing bases, even Punjab, certain southern states, we do have that challenge to get the material to the port. And I think we'll end up losing anywhere between a week to 10 days to sometimes 2 weeks if there's congestion, whether you're taking the train route or the trucking route. And then happens several times that you miss the sailing date. And you miss the sailing date, it's another week gone again. So manufacturing units based closer to ports like Pipavav or Navasheva or Chennai ports definitely have that advantage. I'm not sure if there is an easy way out of this, other than creating more corridors and more frequency of trains to get material from these dry ports to the ports of sailing. The other thing that we do a lot of, especially for component exports, is air freight. And I'm talking about pre-COVID. What we did see that air freight ex-India to particularly countries like Europe and Far East was actually very competitive and very attractive. So that became a very viable way, at least for smaller component supplies, and that put you at par as far as delivery and factory delivery periods to your end customer. And that is something which we have over the years availed of. Last year and a half, it's through the roof. It's unviable, I admit, but I think it's a matter of time that air freight for smaller component supplies would put you at par with the global suppliers, particularly when we're more land-based.
Awesome. That's
also, just to add to that, I think we need more direct sailings. We today only have 1 or 2 options for direct sailings to the US. It's all transshipments. We end up losing a lot more time when goods go to Colombo, change port there. And, so we need more direct sailings ex-India.
And I think that's also got to do with scale, the kind of quantum that is being actually generated.
Directly,
Is that good?
directly correlated with that.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay. All right. Kalyanji, I want to ask you that you've been exporting into so many countries and you interact with a lot of the government bodies. Now, from a support perspective, all the foreign embassies have a trade desk. That's very normal.
Yeah.
Do these trade desks actually help you in any way, or is it just a?
Yes, they can. They can help in a big way. Like the direct experience with the Indian embassy in Thailand, in Bangkok. Many times, there was many times we have faced there is a lockdown over here, and we have even sent our proposal to those people. The embassy took the trouble of packing it and sending and taking it to the customer and giving it.
Right.
Many times we face lots of discrimination, like as Indians. Like I tell you, in many countries, including a few developing nations, they have a preference for supplies from OECD countries. And what happens, especially some Asian countries, even they feel that anything coming from the OECD countries are bound to be superior. And what they do, they keep on talking to us for years. Say, in case of a very large project, 2-3 years we have been giving them budgetary proposal and preparing that. At the end of the day, they take our engineering has been done by us, not really by the companies from OECD, because we are the poor people who go in details, in depth into engineering. We prepare it, they use it at the end of the day, take a price from those people, compare it with our price, and then place the order. Same thing happens to large EPC contractors, because we basically supply a cooling tower, which is a component in their entire EPC in a project of refinery or say a power plant. They do it the same way. We support them for 2-3 years. At the end of the day, this happens. Many times we have put up these issues with Indian embassies in those countries. They try to help. But it doesn't really go through. At the end of the day, it has to be taken up to their government, with their government, saying that it actually, at the end of the day, when you break through, then you see your product, your system is much better compared to the others. But you face this, we face this regularly. And this is where, if our embassies are a little more, there is that focus is not there really, but there are some individuals who try to help you. In fact, a few days back, I was talking to our Uzbek embassy in Tashkent. The person over there is very cooperative. He gave in details what is going to happen in Uzbekistan. I was basically interested in that nuclear power project, when it is coming, what is the progress and all. He, on the other hand, told me that after the new government in Uzbek took over from that Islam Karimov, who was there in Uzbekistan for maybe after the Soviet Union breakup from 1990 onwards, so many years. He was serving for more than 30 years. This government is taking very, very progressive steps. It's now really progressing, and that's a country of 33 million people, and it's developing power, oil and gas, electricity, and road all together. And he was welcoming. He was telling that you please come and also set up an office here and ask all your friends in India to come. And Indians have a big acceptability in Uzbekistan. In fact, in all the CIS countries, Indians are accepted. Of course, in Russia as well. This is because of some historic reasons.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
We came together, fought together during the Bangladesh liberation, and Raj Kapoor song. You know, almost half the Russians and Uzbeks, they know that song.
Nice.
And yeah,
So you're saying at the end of the day, Bollywood has a big role to play as far as building
yeah,
our brand India is
yes.
concerned.
Culture has a very big role to play in accepting. It is not only your equipment and system which you are selling; it's also yourself you are selling to them. Your friendship.
Amazing. Absolutely.
That's
Brilliant soft skills
very
that you brought
important.
out of this. Yeah. So there's a
Yes.
very interesting question that's also come up who wants to know, you're already the largest company, you're exporting from India. What are your plans for the next 10, 15 years? Where do you want to go from here?
We want to go big, very big. You know, because this is the first step to get into this nuclear power projects on a foreign soil. Doing this such kind of a construction work is not that easy. You have to have partners everywhere. In Bangladesh also, we had a good partner. They were mighty big civil contractors, and we got support from them. But the second project we did ourselves, and
Amazing.
partner was magnanimous not to I mean put a spoke in that. So we got that. In similarly in Uzbekistan, in Egypt, we will have to have partners and then go ahead with that. And it will be one day when we will do all the projects in Europe and
Awesome.
also
That's very optimistic. And I like what you said.
yes,
No market is easy. It is our
no,
responsibility to make all these markets easy. That's a
right,
big takeaway.
right.
Awesome. All right, great. So we have last 15 minutes before we close our session. So, Akash, I want to actually get from you. We have this whole. I'm just going generic. A lot of feedback that came from the members. China is big. Yeah. They're a big global players,
They
and
are.
they have all the advantage over India. And it's no way we can win this. Is that true? Do you think that's the case, or do we have all hopes are lost?
Again, I mean, Priyank said, if we are able to create a differentiation, we can beat China hands down. But if it is a commodity product, pure volume game, we are nowhere close to China volume. I mean, let us accept it honestly. But then you put value proposition into your product, you bring in the technical know-how, you bring in some exclusive thing which nobody else can offer, then you are into that game. Otherwise, on a run-of-the-mill projects, run-of-the-mill product, taking China head-on is very, very difficult. Either you take a hit on your profitability, you go down and match their price, or even go lower than them. Otherwise, we are nowhere. I mean, let us honestly accept that. It's the
So
sheer
it's all
volume.
about differentiation. It's all about differentiation. You've got to bring in
Yes,
the differentiation.
yes. But if, I mean, as I said, the China volumes are unimaginable. And then you see their infrastructure, their factory. The cost of producing good is also lower than what we do it in India, and it's only because of volume. I mean, if I have to make 100,000 fans every year, from my current level of making about 12,000 fans in a year, I mean, my input cost will also come down, right? So all those, I mean, China, we are growing. I mean, with COVID has also helped with the acceptability of Indian product over Chinese product. A lot of countries had they were aggressive against China, so there the Indian stepped in, and all those advantages are there. But the fact remains that it is very difficult to take China head on in terms of and one-to-one comparison. So we have to create differentiator and beat them out on the technical superiority of our product. So
Awesome. That's right. That's great. So, Priyank, from your perspective, you've been into domestic supplies and also exports. A lot of domestic companies who are aspiring to get into exports. What are is the margins better? And if it's good, what are the kind of multiples that you're looking from your domestic supplies?
There's no single answer to that either, right? It depends.
Yeah.
The always political answer. Well, I'll give you specific examples. Let me make it real. The thing to understand is it is not. It is exactly true that brand and competition is what determines a margin. Right? In the air conditioning industry, we have a brand in India. We are widely accepted, and we are able to have better margins than in some countries where everybody in the world is present, and it's an undifferentiated product. Whereas if you go into a differentiated product in the same market, we'll get better margins. In some markets, like let's take the example of the US. The US time cost is very highly valued, and in distribution type of products, you can actually earn 50% more pure markup. Imagine all of it is margin versus a project, because in a project, all over the world people are coming, time is there, but in if there is a refinery or a plant that needs a product, whatever has on the shelf, they'll take it. The time cost of money is very high in that kind of a market. That's not true in all kinds of markets, because other markets may not have that much of an installed base, that much of a distribution system where these things work. So I think what goes into the margin is determined by how differentiated your product is, number one. Number two, what's your brand presence and value? If you're basically just another low-cost supplier from a third world country, you're not going to get better margins. And number three, the competitive structure in that particular space. We get better margins in the US on these distribution, whereas we'll get much worse margins on a project. Whereas in Australia, because very few people go to Australia, you end up having less competition, and so you end up getting a better margin. So it depends on the entire competitive structure in the product space that you. And there also, even in valves, we have engineered valves and commodity valves. So even in valves, the margin depends on the entire competitive space around you and what differentiation you have. So it is very much possible to get a better margin. Again, goes back to differentiation, but it can be sometimes purely a matter of volume and scale, which also has overall benefits to your economic, to your business and your operations larger. You may get the benefit of volumes without additional margin from that market, but overall growth in your own business that as a result gives you economies of scale and helps you have better margins net, not necessarily from that market.
Awesome. Varun, actually to bring you on, you being an Indian manufacturer, you built a brand. How big is the brand role in the global market? Do you believe that's possible, or is it all about white labeling? I make it for a bigger brand and I should just stay production oriented, manufacturing oriented. How does it? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. So just before I get to that question, just to add on what Priyank was mentioning, I have one thing to add. When you export, there are certain intangibles that also come along. So, and I think every company, in my opinion, in India should aspire to export, even if as a first target, it's about just 5% of your revenue. So the spillover benefits are that you are obviously exposed to international standards and technical demands. You get, when you travel, you meet customers, you get ideas for new product developments, new product fields open up. And also at the end of the day, it helps attract, there's an HR spillover to it. You help attract more talent into your company. And obviously also it makes business fun again, because if you're just domestically, you're dealing with the same stakeholders day in, day out. This opens up whole new travel opportunities, meeting international people. And I think it brings about energy and fun back to the business. So I think my quick message is that everyone should aspire to do, even if as a first target, it's just 5% of your total revenue. Brand.
I would just say, Varun, I think I totally agree with everything you said, but the other part is, if you don't start exporting, the world will come to you and you'll be outdated. So you need to stay current. That is fundamentally also a reason why everybody should export. So totally endorse what you said. Please go ahead.
And brand, of course, plays a very important role. It's easier said than done. It takes years, decades to build a brand, and you need to be very clear what you want your brand to stand for, whether it's quality, reliability, engineering, delivery on time. So brand at the end of the day takes a while. There's a lot of marketing cost and effort to it as well. There's a lot of sales cost and effort to it, but it definitely plays important role. And it's a long-term strategy as opposed to white labeling or brand labeling for somebody else. That's a short to medium playing goal. But if you're in it for the long run, if you have a vision for your company which is going over a decade, then invest in the brand and be very clear what you want your brand to stand for and actually work on it.
So, but did you initially start as like a white label product where you're just manufacturing for
No.
someone else? Or you
I
went
think
straight from the
we stood for an applied engineered product. So I think one is sort of built upon that, and it stayed with that as an applied engineering product as the
Amazing.
core strength of the company. Yeah.
Ajit,
Amazing.
I'll take the analogy of, if you don't mind, sorry to interrupt your
Sure,
flow.
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I'd like the analogy of a movie, right? In a movie, you have so many people in the crew, right? From the story writer to the director to the cinematographer to the cameraman to the musicians to the producer. Everybody gets a movie done. But who gets the maximum recognition? It's the face on the screen. It's the
Yeah.
hero and the heroine. It's the actors who get the maximum recognition and often maximum rewards. The point I'm trying to say is the one who is in front of the customer actually always captures the maximum value in the value chain. So if you white label and you're not the one who's making the brand, then the person who's in front of the customer, he knows what the customer is willing to pay. He knows what the customer want. They dictate terms, and you are basically dependent on them. And they are very able to capture a lot more of the value in the value chain of the whole product or system, whatever that you're offering. And so, if you really want to be a master of your own destiny, brand is one way to do it. Of course, you can have scale, and you can have other ways by which you can cover up for any. If you're white labeling, that is also has advantages in terms of scale, and maybe you have some other differentiation around that. But personally, I always feel that the one who's in front of the customer always has the first opportunity to capture maximum value. So having your own brand, while it takes a long-term effort, is always in your favor.
Amazing. Absolutely good. Karanji, I want you to have the last say in this. There are a lot of companies who are now wanting to get into manufacturing. And what do you think? What is your message to them? A lot of small companies, you've been in this industry for such a long time. You're like fully into saying that I want to go all around the world. So a lot of companies who are now aspiring. What's your
Yeah.
message for them?
Yes, that's right. But I think the first step is you have to have the right partner worldwide, because you can't be everywhere right in the beginning. So you have to first judge the market, which is the least crowded one, which is the most difficult one, where people don't go. Now, what I find right now after this COVID, it had a positive effect, like this Quadra formation. After that, we feel many nations are not welcoming Chinese products, many of them worldwide. Now there is an anti-Chinese sentiment. I have seen in Australia, I keep traveling to Australia, and then I have seen that all the Chinese contracts have been cancelled. They have taken a risk because 60% of their overseas students are from China. And Australia was never industrially progressive country. It was an agricultural one, focused on the environment and tourism, also New Zealand. But the education was something which was very important for them, because a lot of revenue is to be generated from the universities. Chinese students are not coming anymore because they cancelled all the contracts. That is one. Secondly, what they are doing, they are now investing in a large way in hydrogen as the alternative energy. And that is the R&D, the amount of money they have spent on R&D is enormous. They have taken this cue from China. Chinese people do a lot of R&D every time. They also do copying, reverse engineering. R&D is also done. So that is a market which I see where the GDP is increasing. It was 40 rupees to a dollar just a year back. Today it is touching 60 any day. US dollar hasn't increased so much. So, and not only that, they are also investing in strengthening their marketing teams in various nations. Like Australia in India is now really focusing on business, attracting Indian businessmen, and they have given away free, almost free investment visa you are almost like a citizen the next day within 7 days. If you invest some $10 million,
Amazing.
it's
So that's
like that.
fabulous.
Yes,
That's
yes.
fabulous. So I
You
guess
can see that, and there are not much players right now, and with this water formation, and if you were actually having connections in Taiwan, and in Australia, you can actually capture new markets. The Chinese EPC contractors are still getting their jobs, but they are sourcing. They're trying to source all the components, all the equipments from outside China.
okay.
Like they are also talking to us. I mean, so, and that base has to be in Taiwan because it's difficult to reach China directly. But although they are fighting, otherwise, you can see all this because of the same language. All the Taiwanese industrialists have friends in China.
Wow.
So that will be your gateway. So this
Very
is, I
enlightening.
think, that is a easier way to start. I mean, so that with a small thing you can start, and then slowly you get into this kind of a business. And this sentiment is going to stay for a long time.
Thank you
Because
so much. Great.
people still have, whether it is rationally correct or not, people have a feeling that their suffering is because of China.
Yeah, so that's an opportunity in that. So you're very clearly saying,
yes,
great,
that's a
awesome.
good opportunity created by Donald Trump, terming it as Wuhan virus,
Oh my
the Chinese
God.
virus.
Okay, great. So we've had
We
90
should be-
minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, so we've had 90 minutes, and I think we're just up with our time.
Right.
But gentlemen, it's been a fabulous session, and I think we've actually covered on the opportunities that we've had the challenges around it, and the help that we've all required. And I'm sure people who have been watching us have had a great takeaway, and this will go a long way. This event is going to be there immediately after the show on our website itself. You can go to the Rata India website and show. But thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking time out. It's been fabulous talking to all of you. It's great that you all opened up your minds. You've been forthcoming, and this is a lot of valuable information for a lot of our members, because the Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Trade Association is 72 years old, and we represent the MSME in the industry. And we were really wanting to bring our stories, India stories out there, which actually motivate the rest of the people to grow our business to become global players. But before I close, there's a very interesting comment that just showed up. Okay, and I think that's a nice way to close the show, and I wanted to share it with all my panelists. He says the Rata program has become like a Bloomberg BBC show, really very professional and very informative. So we are in association, but we had some very interesting panelists today who's been very, very participative, and that's what has actually done the trick out here. But it's been fantastic. Looking forward to engaging with all of you all over again. And thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. It was great fun. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.